December 20, 1941. Kunming Airfield, Yunnan Province, China. Flight leader Robert J. Sandel's hands gripped the control stick of his Curtiss P-40B Warhawk as he watched the radar operator sprint across the tarmac. 4 years. The Japanese have owned these skies for 4 years, and now we're supposed to stop them with these. He looked down the line at the shark-mouthed fighters, their teeth painted across the nose cowlings in garish red and white. 10 aircraft. That's all they could get airborne today. 10 P-40Bs against what the spotters were reporting as at least 10 Japanese bombers escorted by fighters. Probably the legendary Mitsubishi A6M Zero, the aircraft that had humiliated every Allied fighter it had encountered from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines to Malaya. The P-40 beside him bore tail number 47, flown by Charles Older. The aircraft specifications ran through Sandel's mind. Allison V-1710 33 engine, producing 1,040 horsepower. Maximum level flight speed of 362 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Rate of climb, 2,600 feet per minute. 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing, carrying 281 rounds per gun. He knew the Zero's specifications just as well. Chenault had drilled them into every pilot during training at Tunggu. Maximum speed, 331 miles per hour. Rate of climb, 4,517 feet per minute. Turn radius so tight it could reverse direction inside the P-40's turning circle in seconds. Weight, 5,313 pounds, fully loaded. The P-40B weighed 7,459 pounds. By every measurable standard, we should lose. But Claire Lee Chenault, the weathered, partially deaf former U.S. Army Air Corps captain who commanded the American Volunteer Group, had spent 3 months teaching them to ignore those standards. "You will not dogfight," he had repeated in his Arkansas drawl until every pilot could recite it in their sleep. "You will not turn with them. You will not climb with them. You dive, you shoot, you escape. Nothing else." The early warning that come 47 minutes ago from Chinese spotters positioned along the Japanese approach route from Hanoi. 47 minutes. Enough time to climb to 18,000 feet, position themselves between the sun and the approaching bombers, and execute exactly what Chenault had trained them to. At 10:15 hours, Sandel spotted them. 10 Mitsubishi K-21 Sally bombers in tight formation, engines droning as they approached from the southeast at 15,000 feet. No fighter escort visible. The Japanese apparently didn't think they needed one. What happened in the next 17 minutes would prove them catastrophically wrong, and demonstrate that the obsolete P-40 Warhawk possessed one advantage that would transform aerial combat over China and Burma for the next 7 months. The journey to understanding that advantage had begun exactly 7 months earlier when a controversial American officer arrived in China with a theory that contradicted everything the world's air forces believed about fighter tactics. The journey to that December morning had begun on May 15, 1941, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 8746, authorizing reserve officers and enlisted men to resign from the U.S. military and join the Central Aircraft Manufacturing Company as civilian employees. It was, in practical terms, permission to create an American mercenary air force to fight for China against Japan. Claire Lee Chenault had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. The 47-year-old former Army Air Corps officer had resigned from the service in 1937, officially due to partial deafness and chronic bronchitis, but actually because his tactical theories about fighter aviation had made him too many enemies among the bomber-focused brass. The Army Air Corps in the 1930s worshipped the doctrine that the bomber will always get through. that modern bombers flying in tight formation with interlocking defensive fire could penetrate any fighter defense. Chennault believed that doctrine was dangerously wrong, and he had been right. In 1937, Madame Chiang Kai-shek's brother, T.V. Soong, had recruited Chennault as an aviation advisor to the Chinese Air Force. For 4 years, Chennault watched Japanese aircraft dominate Chinese skies with virtual impunity. The Mitsubishi A5M Claude and later the A6M Zero fighters established air superiority wherever they appeared. Japanese bomber formations struck Chinese cities and military targets at will. Chinese pilots flying a hodgepodge of obsolete American and Soviet aircraft died in appalling numbers. But Chennault studied every engagement, interviewed surviving Chinese pilots, examined crashed Japanese aircraft, and developed his tactical system. When Roosevelt's order gave him the chance to recruit American pilots and test his theories with American-built fighters, Chennault moved quickly. The Central Aircraft Manufacturing Company, a front organization established by William Pawley, an American businessman with aircraft factories in China, offered remarkable inducements. $600 per month salary, more than triple an Army Air Corps captain's pay, $500 bonus for every confirmed aerial victory, and 1-year contracts. Between May and July 1941, Chennault recruited approximately 100 pilots and 200 ground crew from the U.S. Army Air Corps, Navy, and Marine Corps. Most were junior officers and enlisted men looking for adventure and money. The Curtiss P-40 Warhawk, officially designated as the P-40B and P-40C variants for this contract, arrived in crates aboard ships to Rangoon, Burma, and were transported by rail to Toungoo Airfield for assembly. The American volunteer group would receive approximately 100 aircraft total, though never more than 50 would be operational simultaneously due to maintenance issues, combat damage, and spare parts shortages. The P-40B represented Curtiss-Wright's 1940 fighter design. Its Allison V-1710 33 liquid-cooled V-12 engine, mounted in the distinctive nose cowling, produced 1,040 horsepower, driving a 3-bladed Curtiss electric constant-speed propeller. The engine's liquid cooling system required a ventral radiator intake beneath the fuselage, creating additional drag. Maximum level flight speed reached 362 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Service ceiling, 32,400 feet. Combat range, approximately 650 miles with drop tanks. Armament consisted of 6 Browning M2 .50 caliber machine guns, 3 mounted in each wing, synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. Each gun carried 281 rounds in ammunition boxes within the wing structure. Combined rate of fire, approximately 4,800 rounds per minute. The .50 round, weighing 1.7 ounces, with a muzzle velocity of 2,910 feet per second, could penetrate aircraft structure and components with devastating effect. Critical to the P-40's survivability, armor plating behind the pilot's seat, quarter-inch hardened steel, armored glass windscreen, and self-sealing fuel tanks. The fuel system included 6 internal wing tanks holding a total of 148 gallons, protected by layers of rubber that would swell and seal when punctured by bullets. This self-sealing system added 212 pounds to the aircraft's empty weight. The P-40's all-metal stress skin construction could absorb tremendous battle damage and continue flying. But it couldn't turn with a zero. At Toungoo from July through November 1941, Chennault drilled his pilots relentlessly in the tactical system he'd developed. The Zero can outturn you, outclimb you, and outmaneuver you, he told them repeatedly. Never, and I mean never, engage in a turning dogfight. Use your advantages: speed, firepower, and diving capability. The P-40's critical advantage lay in its dive performance. The tone should be confident, articulate, and energetic enough to sustain the listener's attention without sounding dramatic or exaggerated. Aim for a historical documentary style, informative, immersive, and emotionally balanced. The voice should carry the authority and composure of a seasoned history narrator in his 40s, reminiscent of classic History Channel or high-quality YouTube documentary narrations. Focus on pristine vocal clarity, clean audio texture, and a natural studio presence suitable for World War II storytelling. While the lighter Zero, with its 940 horsepower Nakajima Sake radial engine, could reach only approximately 360 miles per hour in a sustained dive before structural concerns forced pilots to reduce speed, the heavier P-40, with its more powerful engine and robust construction, could dive at speeds exceeding 460 miles per hour. That 100-mile-per-hour differential meant a diving P-40 could escape any Zero attempting pursuit. Chennault's tactical doctrine exploited this advantage ruthlessly. His pilots would patrol at altitudes between 18,000 and 23,000 feet, higher than most Japanese bomber formations. When enemy aircraft appeared, P-40s would dive from superior altitude, achieve speeds between 400 and 460 miles per hour, make a single firing pass through the enemy formation with their 6.50 caliber guns blazing, then continue diving to escape altitude, extend away from the combat area, climb back to patrol altitude away from enemy fighters, and repeat. Boom and zoom, pilots called it. Hit and run in Chennault's terminology. The tactic required iron discipline. Every pilot's instinct, trained through peacetime fighter exercises that emphasized aerobatic maneuverability, screamed to turn and dogfight. Chennault's system demanded they resist that instinct absolutely. The critical enabler for this tactical system was Chennault's early warning network. Working with Chinese nationalist forces, Chennault established a network of ground spotters extending from Japanese airfields in Indochina and southern China across approach routes to Chinese cities and military bases. Spotters, armed with radios or telephones connected to central coordination stations, reported Japanese aircraft departures, numbers, types, altitudes, and headings. This intelligence reached Chennault's operations centers typically within 30 to 60 minutes of Japanese takeoff, enough time for P-40s to scramble, climb to intercept altitude, and position themselves advantageously. The system's sophistication surprised Japanese intelligence when they eventually captured documentation. Chennault had effectively created an integrated air defense network decades before such systems became standard. On November 20, 1941, the American volunteer group moved from Toungoo to operational bases in China and Burma. The 1st Pursuit Squadron, Adam and Eve's, deployed to Kunming. The 2nd Pursuit Squadron, Panda Bears, went to Kunming as well. The 3rd Pursuit Squadron, Hell's Angels, deployed to Mingalerden Airfield near Rangoon, Burma, to defend the southern terminus of the Burma Road, China's only remaining supply line to the outside world. The shark's teeth nose art, copied from a 1940 photograph of a British RAF P-40 squadron in North Africa, went on during these deployments. Ground crew painted the distinctive red and white teeth across the nose cowlings and air intake of every P-40, creating an intimidating appearance that would become the AV's trademark. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Malaya, and Thailand. The Pacific War had begun. The American volunteer group, technically civilian employees of the Chinese government, was now at war with Japan regardless of legal niceties. December 20th, 1941, brought the AV's first combat and the first test of Chennault's tactical theories against Japanese forces. At 10:20 hours on December 20, 1941, Robert Sandell led his flight of 4 P-40Bs into a diving attack on the 10 Ki-21 Sally bombers approaching Kunming from 18,000 feet. Diving speed approximately 420 miles per hour. The bombers, flying straight and level at 15,000 feet, presented perfect targets. Sandell's 6.50 caliber guns fired 281 rounds each in a 3-second burst, 1,686 rounds total, into the lead bomber. The Sally's unprotected fuel tanks and thin aluminum skin offered no resistance. The bomber exploded, nose pitching down, crew dead before they could react. Flight leader Arvid Olsen's P-40 destroyed a second bomber. Charles Older's guns ripped through a third. By 10:23, 4 Japanese bombers were falling in flames. The surviving 6 bombers jettisoned their bomb loads short of Kunming and turned south toward Hanoi. 2 more crashed attempting to reach their base, fuel systems shredded by .50 caliber rounds. 4 confirmed destroyed in the engagement. 2 more destroyed attempting to return. 0 American losses. The Flying Tiger's first combat had validated Chennault's tactical system completely. The Japanese attacked Kunming again on December 23. This time they sent 9 bombers with 12 Zero fighters as escort. Chennault scrambled 16 P-40s. Following doctrine precisely, the American pilots ignored the Zeros entirely, dove through them at over 400 miles per hour, destroyed 3 bombers in a single pass, then escaped before the Zeros could react. Japanese fighter pilots, expecting the Americans to engage them in turning combat as Chinese pilots had done for 4 years, found themselves helpless against opponents who simply refused to fight on Japanese terms. On December 25, 1941, the 3rd Pursuit Squadron at Rangoon encountered its first major action. 70 Japanese aircraft, 54 Ki-21 Sally bombers escorted by 16 fighters attacked the city in a Christmas Day raid intended to destroy port facilities and terrorize the civilian population. Squadron leader Arvid Olsen scrambled 12 P-40s from Mingaladon. The engagement began at 11:47 in the morning. Olsen's pilots had climbed to 21,000 feet on early warning from ground spotters. The Japanese formation approached at 16,000 feet in neat V formations, supremely confident. P-40s dove through the formation at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, guns firing in 3-second bursts, then escaped downward before Japanese fighter pilots could even register what had happened. 4 bombers fell during the first pass. The American pilots dove to 5,000 feet, extended 3 miles away from the combat, climbed back to 18,000 feet, repositioned, and attacked again. 3 more bombers destroyed. The Japanese fighters attempted to intercept, but their 331 miles per hour maximum speed left them chasing P-40s diving at 420 miles per hour, an impossible pursuit. By noon, 6 Japanese bombers had been confirmed destroyed over Rangoon. Bombs intended for port facilities fell into the jungle or the bay. 0 American aircraft lost. The psychological impact on Japanese bomber crews proved even more significant than the physical losses. The pattern repeated across southern China and Burma throughout January 1942. Japanese bombers approaching Chinese cities found American fighters positioned above them, diving at speeds the Zeros couldn't match, destroying bombers with concentrated .50 caliber fire, then escaping before retaliation was possible. January 3, 1942, Rangoon. Japanese attack with 27 bombers. 6 destroyed, no American losses. January 4, 1942 again. 30 bombers escorted by 20 fighters. 4 bombers destroyed, 1 P-40 damaged but recovered at base. January 23, 1942. The largest engagement yet. 63 Japanese bombers, escorted by multiple fighter squadrons, attacked in waves. The 3rd Pursuit Squadron, reinforced by pilots from the 2nd Squadron, scrambled 16 P-40s. Squadron Commander Robert H. Neal coordinated the defense. The American pilots climbed to 20,000 feet on early warning. As the massive Japanese formation approached at 16,000 feet, Neal divided his force into 2 groups. 8 P-40s attacked from 20,000 feet, diving through the bomber formation center. The second group of 8 attacked 30 seconds later from a different angle. Japanese fighter pilots, positioned to protect against conventional dogfighting attacks, found themselves helpless against opponents who simply refused to fight on Japanese terms. On January 25, 1941, the 3rd Pursuit Squadron at Rangoon encountered its first major action. 70 Japanese aircraft, 54 Ki-21 Sally bombers escorted by 16 fighters, attacked the city in a Christmas Day raid intended to destroy port facilities and terrorize the civilian population. Squadron leader Arvid Olsen scrambled 12 P-40s from Mingaladon. The engagement began at 11:47 in the morning. Olsen's pilots had climbed to 21,000 feet on early warning from ground spotters. The Japanese formation approached at 16,000 feet in neat V formations, supremely confident. P-40s dove through the formation at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour, guns firing in 3-second bursts, then escaped downward before Japanese fighter pilots could even register what had happened. 4 bombers fell during the first pass. The American pilots dove to 5,000 feet, extended 3 miles away from the combat, climbed back to 18,000 feet, repositioned, and attacked again. 3 more bombers destroyed. The Japanese fighters attempted to intercept, but their 331 miles per hour maximum speed left them chasing P-40s diving at 420 miles per hour, an impossible pursuit. By noon, 6 Japanese bombers had been confirmed destroyed over Rangoon. Bombs intended for port facilities fell into the jungle or the bay. 0 American aircraft lost. The psychological impact on Japanese bomber crews proved even more significant than the physical losses. The pattern repeated across southern China and Burma throughout January 1942. Japanese bombers approaching Chinese cities found American fighters positioned above them, diving at speeds the Zeros couldn't match, destroying bombers with concentrated .50 caliber fire, then escaping before retaliation was possible. January 3, 1942, Rangoon. Japanese attack with 27 bombers. 6 destroyed, no American losses. January 4, 1942 again. 30 bombers escorted by 20 fighters. 4 bombers destroyed, 1 P-40 damaged but recovered at base. January 23, 1942. The largest engagement yet. 63 Japanese bombers escorted by multiple fighter squadrons attacked in waves. The 3rd Pursuit Squadron, reinforced by pilots from the 2nd Squadron, scrambled 16 P-40s. Squadron Commander Robert H. Neal coordinated the defense. The American pilots climbed to 20,000 feet on early warning. As the massive Japanese formation approached at 16,000 feet, Neal divided his force into 2 groups. 8 P-40s attacked from 20,000 feet, diving through the bomber formation center. The second group of 8 attacked 30 seconds later from a different angle. Japanese fighter pilots, positioned to protect against conventional dogfighting attacks, found themselves helpless against opponents who simply refused to fight on Japanese terms. When the raid ended, intelligence officers confirmed 27 Japanese aircraft destroyed. the majority bombers, though several fighters fell attempting to protect the formation. One P-40 was shot down, pilot killed. Two others returned with battle damage but landed safely. 27 Japanese aircraft destroyed for one American loss. The engagement became legendary in AVG history and proved Chennault's tactical doctrine could succeed even against overwhelming numerical odds. Japanese commanders began to recognize they faced something unprecedented. Their fighter pilots reported that American aircraft refused to dogfight, attacked only from diving passes, and escaped before engagement was possible. Bomber crews reported devastating firepower from aircraft they barely glimpsed before it struck. The Americans weren't fighting honorably, they were fighting effectively. But the advantage depended entirely on three conditions remaining constant: early warning providing time to climb to superior altitude, disciplined execution of hit-and-run tactics without deviation into dogfighting, and Japanese fighter pilots continuing to position themselves for conventional turning combat rather than adapting to counter-diving attacks. Throughout early 1942, those conditions held. The shark-mouthed P-40s became the most feared American aircraft in the theater, not because they were the best fighters, but because they were flown by pilots who understood that winning required exploiting the single advantage they possessed. By mid-February 1942, Japanese intelligence had compiled extensive reports on American volunteer group tactics. Fighter pilots from multiple engagements described identical patterns. Americans attacked only from altitude, dived at extreme speeds, made a single firing pass, then escaped. They never turned to dogfight. They never climbed to pursue. They never engaged in prolonged combat. Staff officers at Japanese Army and Navy Air Headquarters studied these reports with growing concern. The tactical pattern was unmistakable, and it represented a fundamental challenge to Japanese air combat doctrine. On February 28, 1942, Second Lieutenant Takashi Nakamura of the 50th Sentai became one of the first Japanese fighter pilots to articulate the P-40's critical advantage in an after-action report. His 9-aircraft fighter patrol had attempted to intercept 6 P-40s attacking a bomber formation near Mogwai, Burma. The enemy aircraft approached from 23,000 feet while our patrol operated at 19,000 feet, Nakamura wrote. The American fighters dove through our formation before we could maneuver to intercept. We attempted pursuit but could not maintain contact. The enemy achieved speeds we estimate at 650 kilometers per hour, 404 miles per hour. Our maximum speed in level flight is 533 kilometers per hour, 331 miles per hour. In diving pursuit, we reached approximately 580 kilometers per hour, 360 miles per hour, before structural stress warnings forced throttle reduction. The Americans escaped with no difficulty. The mathematics were inescapable. The P-40's heavier construction and more powerful engine gave it a dive speed approximately 100 miles per hour faster than the Zero could safely achieve. In air combat, that differential meant P-40 pilots could always escape a losing engagement by diving away, an option Zero pilots did not possess against the heavier American fighter. Japanese fighter tactics depended fundamentally on maneuverability. The Zero's extraordinary turn rate, achieved by sacrificing armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and robust construction, made it dominant in turning dogfights. Pilots trained extensively in aerobatic combat maneuvers. The entire tactical doctrine assumed opponents would engage in turning combat, where the Zero's advantages became decisive. The Americans simply refused to cooperate. On March 8th, Japanese staff officers attempted a tactical adaptation. Fighter patrols received orders to maintain altitude superiority over bomber formations, positioning themselves 3,000 to 5,000 feet above the bombers to intercept diving attacks. The theory was sound. If Zero fighters patrolled at 22,000 feet while bombers flew at 17,000 feet, P-40s attacking from 20,000 feet would encounter fighters before reaching the bombers. The first test came on March 10 during a raid on Mogwai. 12 Zero fighters patrolled at 21,000 feet above 18 bombers at 16,000 feet. 8 P-40s from the AVG's 3rd Pursuit Squadron attacked from 24,000 feet, 3,000 feet above the Japanese fighter patrol. The Americans dove through the fighter screen at over 420 miles per hour, destroyed 2 bombers in a single pass, then continued diving to 8,000 feet and escaped. Zero pilots attempting pursuit couldn't match the dive speed. The tactical adaptation had failed. Captain David Lee Tex Hill, one of the AVG's most successful pilots with 11 confirmed victories by March 1942, later explained the dynamic. "Chennault taught us that altitude was life. We always climbed higher than the intelligence estimates said the Japanese would be. If they were reported at 18,000 feet, we went to 22,000. If we saw fighters above us, we didn't attack. We climbed higher or withdrew. The early warning network gave us time to position ourselves advantageously every single time. The Japanese never adapted to counter it." The psychological transformation of Japanese pilots became evident in combat reports from April and May 1942. Earlier reports described engagements confidently, expecting victory. Later reports showed caution bordering on fear. A captured Japanese diary from April 1942, belonging to Sergeant Yoshio Nakamura of the 64th Sentai, included this entry after an engagement near Lashio, Burma. "The shark-mouthed fighters appeared from above without warning. They dove through our formation at impossible speed. Takahashi's aircraft exploded, just exploded, no fire, no smoke, just fragments. The Americans were gone before we could turn to engage. How do you fight an enemy who refuses to be fought? We are told our aircraft are superior. We are told we are better trained. But superiority means nothing against an opponent you cannot catch." The nickname "Flying Tigers," adopted from an American journalist's article in early 1942, spread among Japanese forces, but not as a compliment. Japanese pilots began to genuinely fear the shark-mouthed P-40s because they represented an opponent who had found the Zero's only vulnerability: the inability to catch a faster diving aircraft. That vulnerability existed because of specific design choices made 5 years earlier when the Zero was developed. Understanding those choices requires examining the aircraft's origins and the requirements that shaped its characteristics. The journey to the Zero's design began in May 1937, when the Imperial Japanese Navy issued requirements for a new carrier-based fighter to replace the Mitsubishi A6M. Specification 12C called for specific capabilities: maximum speed of at least 270 knots, 311 miles per hour, at 13,000 feet. Climb to 9,800 feet in 3.5 minutes. Endurance of 2 hours at normal power or 6 to 8 hours with drop tanks. Armament of 2 20mm cannon and 2 7.7mm machine guns. And the maneuverability to defeat any existing fighter in turning combat. The requirements existed in fundamental tension. High speed required powerful engines and streamlined airframes. Extended range required large fuel capacity. Heavy armament added weight. Exceptional maneuverability required lightweight and large wing area. The mathematics of aircraft design made these requirements mutually exclusive. Jiro Horikoshi, chief designer at Mitsubishi, faced an impossible choice. To achieve the specified range with available engines, the aircraft needed to carry approximately 550 liters, 145 gallons of fuel internally, plus provisions for external drop tanks. Fuel weighs approximately 2.7 kilograms per liter, 6.0 pounds per gallon. The internal fuel load alone weighed 1,485 kilograms, 3,273 pounds. To achieve the specified speed and climb rate with the Nakajima Sakai 12 radial engine producing 940 horsepower, the aircraft's total weight needed to remain under approximately 2,400 kilograms, 5,291 pounds fully loaded. Add the fuel weight, engine weight, approximately 530 kilograms, 1,168 pounds including cowling, armament weight, 2 Type 99 20mm cannon at 26.5 kilograms each, 2 Type 97 7.7mm machine guns at 10.5 kilograms each, pilot weight, approximately 80 kilograms, 176 pounds, and airframe structure, and the weight budget became impossibly tight. The mathematics were brutally simple. Self-sealing fuel tanks, rubber line tanks that sealed around bullet holes, weighed approximately 40% more than standard aluminum tanks. Pilot armor, steel plates behind the seat and armored glass windscreens added approximately 90 kilograms, 198 pounds. Robust structural reinforcement to allow high-speed dives added approximately 120 kilograms, 265 pounds to airframe weight. Horikoshi made the decision that would define the Zero throughout its service life. He eliminated protective features to meet the weight requirement. No self-sealing fuel tanks, no pilot armor, minimal structural reinforcement. The Zero would achieve its performance specifications by sacrificing crew survivability and damage resistance. The justification seemed logical in 1937. Japanese military philosophy emphasized spiritual strength and acceptance of death in service to the emperor. Pilot armor suggested you expected to be shot, which implied defensive thinking. The Bushido Code, the samurai warrior tradition, celebrated death in combat as honorable. Surviving defeat was shameful. Aircraft design reflected these values. Additionally, Japanese combat experience in China from 1937 through 1940 seemed to validate the choices. Chinese fighters rarely penetrated Zero formations. When they did, their light armament, typically 4 or 6 rifle-caliber machine guns, inflicted minimal damage. Japanese pilots reported that Zero fighters could absorb multiple hits from 7.62 rounds without critical system failures. The unprotected fuel tanks rarely caught fire from such small-caliber impacts. The Zero entered service in July 1940 and immediately dominated every opponent it encountered. Chinese fighters fell in appalling numbers. The Zero's 331 mile-per-hour top speed exceeded all Chinese aircraft. Its climb rate allowed it to intercept bombers at any altitude. Its range permitted deep penetration raids previously impossible. Most critically, its turn rate was simply unmatched. Zero pilots could outturn any opponent, get inside their turn radius, and achieve firing position within seconds. But the design assumptions depended on facing opponents with light armament, defensive tactics, and inferior training. When Japanese forces encountered American pilots flying aircraft equipped with 650 caliber machine guns and trained to exploit diving speed advantages, those assumptions collapsed catastrophically. The 50 caliber Browning M2 fired a bullet weighing 1.7 ounces, 48 grams, at a muzzle velocity of 2,910 feet per second, 887 meters per second. Kinetic energy at impact, approximately 13,350 foot-pounds. The round could penetrate 0.875 inches, 22 millimeters, of armor plate at 500 yards. Against unprotected aluminum aircraft skin, typically 0.025 to 0.04 inches, 0.6 to 1 millimeters thick, the 50 caliber round passed through as if the metal wasn't there. 6 50 caliber guns firing simultaneously delivered 4,800 rounds per minute. A 3-second burst put 240 rounds into the target area. Each round that struck a Zero's fuel tank punctured the thin aluminum without sealing. Fuel vaporized instantly upon exposure to hot engine components or gun muzzle flash. The aircraft became a fireball. Japanese pilots coined their own nicknames for the Zero once they understood its vulnerability. Flying lighter and one-shot Zippo became common terms. The gallows humor reflected genuine terror. The shark-mouthed P-40s of the American Volunteer Group accumulated their kill total systematically across 6.5 months of combat. The pattern repeated with mechanical precision. Early warning provided time to climb to superior altitude. Japanese formations approached at predictable altitudes and speeds. P-40s dove through bomber formations at over 400 miles per hour. 50 caliber fire shredded unprotected aircraft. American pilots escaped before Japanese fighters could engage. January 1942 saw the pattern establish itself. Rangoon defense actions on January 3, 4, 20, 23, 24, and 28 resulted in 47 confirmed Japanese aircraft destroyed against 3 P-40s lost in combat. The January 23 engagement alone, 16 P-40s against 63 Japanese bombers and escorts, ended with 27 Japanese aircraft destroyed for 1 American loss. February 1942 brought intensified combat as Japanese forces advanced into Burma. On February 25, the 3rd Pursuit Squadron defended Mangaladon Airfield against a major raid. 8 P-40s intercepted 37 bombers escorted by fighters. Following standard doctrine, the Americans ignored the escorts entirely and dove through the bomber formation. 9 bombers fell. 0 American losses. March 1942 saw British forces retreat from Rangoon. The AVG withdrew to bases in China, continuing operations from Kunming, Loiwing, and forward airstrips. Combat tempo increased. From March 1 through March 31, AVG pilots flew 389 combat sorties and claimed 43 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Japanese records examined post-war confirmed 37 of these claims. The discrepancy reflected common combat reporting variants. In the chaos of air combat, multiple pilots often fired at the same target and each claimed credit. What mattered was the pattern. Japanese aircraft were being destroyed at rates far exceeding American losses. April brought the loss of the AVG's first pilot whose tactics violated Chennault's doctrine. On April 8, 2nd Pursuit Squadron pilot John Donovan engaged a Zero in a turning dogfight near Loiwing. Donovan had achieved 2 victories previously using proper boom and zoom tactics, but this engagement saw him attempt to outturn his opponent. The Zero reversed inside Donovan's turn within seconds. The P-40 exploded under 20mm cannon fire. Donovan did not survive. Chennault used Donovan's death as a brutal teaching moment. Donovan was an excellent pilot, he told assembled AVG personnel that evening. He died because he forgot everything we trained. You cannot outturn a Zero. You will die if you try. Follow the tactics or don't fly for this group. The message reinforced discipline. Subsequent engagements saw AVG pilots maintain tactical doctrine even in circumstances where dogfighting seemed tempting. On April 28, 6 P-40s from the 1st Pursuit Squadron encountered 8 Zeros escorting bombers near Lashio. The American formation leader, Charles Older, had altitude advantage and clear shots at the fighters. He ignored them, dove through the escort screen, destroyed 2 bombers, and escaped. The Zeros attempted pursuit but couldn't catch the diving P-40s. May 1942 brought the AVG's highest monthly victory total. Japanese air operations intensified as ground forces completed the conquest of Burma. From May 1 through May 31, AVG pilots claimed 92 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Japanese records confirmed 78 losses. Combat occurred almost daily. Kunming faced raids on May 2, 4, 5, 9, 12, and 13. Loiwing faced constant pressure. Forward airstrips operated under constant threat. The psychological toll on Japanese bomber crews became severe. Multiple Japanese accounts describe crews requesting transfer to other assignments rather than fly missions where they might encounter the shark-mouthed P-40s. Bomber formations began operating at night when P-40's lack of airborne radar made interception. Daytime raids decreased in size and frequency. On May 4, 1942, an engagement over Kunming demonstrated the tactical system's maturity. Japanese forces launched their largest raid yet on the city, 48 bombers escorted by 30 fighters. Intelligence estimates reached Chennault's operations center 90 minutes before the formation arrived. Every operational P-40 at Kunming scrambled, 21 aircraft from the 1st and 2nd Pursuit Squadrons. Squadron commanders divided the force into 3 groups of 7 aircraft each, staggered in altitude from 20,000 to 24,000 feet. The first group attacked at 13:15 hours from 24,000 feet, diving through the Japanese fighter escort and bomber formation at over 430 miles per hour. 4 bombers fell during this pass. The second group attacked 2 minutes later from 22,000 feet, destroying 3 more bombers. The third group attacked from 20,000 feet, destroying 2 additional bombers. Total engagement time, 11 minutes. 9 confirmed Japanese aircraft destroyed. 0 American losses. The engagement showed tactical evolution. Earlier actions had been reactive. Japanese attacked, Americans intercepted. By May, Chennault's Operations Center coordinated multi-squadron responses with altitude deconfliction and timed attacks that maximized confusion among Japanese formations. The early warning network had evolved into an integrated air defense system. June and July 1942 saw the AVG's final operations. The group's 1-year contracts expired July 4, 1942, and most personnel chose not to re-enlist when the AVG was absorbed into the U.S. Army 14th Air Force. From June 1 through July 4, the Flying Tigers claimed 43 additional Japanese aircraft destroyed. Combat occurred almost daily, but the pattern remained consistent: altitude advantage, diving attacks, escape before engagement. Repeat. The final AVG combat mission occurred on July 4, 1942. 6 P-40s from the 2nd Pursuit Squadron intercepted 5 Japanese bombers near Hengyang. Following procedures unchanged since December, the Americans climbed to 22,000 feet, dove through the formation, destroyed 2 bombers, and escaped. The remaining bombers jettisoned ordnance and fled. It was a fitting conclusion: disciplined execution of tactical doctrine resulting in victory without loss. From December 20, 1941 through July 4, 1942, exactly 6.5 months, the American Volunteer Group flew approximately 420 combat missions totaling roughly 4,500 combat flying hours. The group's strength never exceeded 100 pilots and 62 operational aircraft at any moment. Maintenance issues, combat damage, accidents, and spare parts shortages typically left only 30 to 40 P-40s available for operations. Victory claims totaled 296 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Post-war examination of Japanese records confirms 229 losses during periods and locations corresponding to AVG combat reports. The discrepancy reflects normal combat overclaiming by all combatants. In the confusion of air combat, multiple pilots often engaged the same target and each filed victory claims. What matters is that even using the conservative Japanese loss figures, the kill ratio exceeded 16-1. American volunteer group losses in air-to-air combat: 14 pilots killed. 4 additional pilots died in accidents. 6 P-40s were destroyed in strafing attacks on airfields. Approximately 30 aircraft were damaged beyond economical repair through combat damage and accidents combined. 14 pilots lost in air combat versus 229 confirmed Japanese aircraft destroyed equals a kill ratio of 16.4-1. Using the AVG's claimed figures of 296 victories, the ratio becomes 21.1-1. By either measure, the Flying Tigers achieved one of the most lopsided victory ratios in aviation history. The P-40B and P-40C variants flown by the AVG represented relatively early Warhawk production. Curtiss Wright manufactured approximately 131 P-40Bs Model 81A2 from March through September 1941, followed by 193 P-40Cs Model 81A3 from September 1941 through April 1942. The primary difference: P-40C models added 2 additional .50 caliber guns in the wings, later removed due to weight concerns, and self-sealing fuel tanks. The AVG received a mix of both variants. Comparative specifications illuminate the choices each side made. Curtiss P-40B Warhawk. Engine: Allison V-1710 33, liquid-cooled V-12. 1,040 horsepower. Maximum speed: 362 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. Dive speed: 460 plus miles per hour. Service ceiling: 32,400 feet. Range: 650 miles combat radius with drop tanks. Armament: 6 .50 caliber machine guns, 1,686 rounds total. Empty weight: 5,590 pounds. Loaded weight: 7,459 pounds. Protection: 212 pounds self-sealing fuel tanks, armored pilot seat, armored windscreen. Construction: all metal stressed skin capable of absorbing substantial battle damage. Mitsubishi A6M Zero. Engine: Nakajima Sakai 12, air-cooled radio, 940 horsepower. Maximum speed: 331 miles per hour at 14,930 feet. Dive speed: some limits 360 miles per hour. Service ceiling: 32,810 feet. Range: 1,160 miles combat radius with drop tanks. Armament: 2 20mm cannon and 2 7.7mm machine guns. Empty weight: 3,704 pounds. Loaded weight: 5,313 pounds. Protection: none. No armor, no self-sealing tanks. Construction: lightweight aluminum, minimal redundancy. The Zero weighed 2,146 pounds less than the P-40B fully loaded, a 40% weight advantage that translated directly into superior maneuverability and climb rate. But that weight savings came entirely from eliminating protection systems and robust construction. The P-40's 212-pound self-sealing fuel tank system, pilot armor, and reinforced structure represented exactly the weight the Zero eliminated to achieve its performance. In terms of firepower philosophy, the comparison reveals different doctrines. The P-40 6 .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns delivered volume of fire, 4,800 rounds per minute combined, with excellent ballistic performance. The .50 caliber round possessed flat trajectory, high velocity, 2,910 feet per second muzzle velocity, and devastating kinetic energy, 13,300 foot-pounds. Against unprotected aircraft, the .50 caliber round punched through aluminum skin and destroyed internal components with ease. The P-40 carried 281 rounds per gun, approximately 3.5 seconds of firing time per gun, totaling 21 seconds of combined fire before exhaustion. The Zero's two Type 99 20mm cannon fired slower, 520 rounds per minute per gun, but delivered explosive projectiles weighing 4.4 ounces each with 1,950 foot-pounds kinetic energy, plus explosive filler. A single 20mm hit could destroy a fighter, but the Zero carried only 60 rounds per cannon, 7 seconds of firing time per gun. The two 7.7mm machine guns provided supplementary fire but lacked the penetration to inflict critical damage on protected aircraft. Zero pilots needed precise marksmanship to achieve kills with their limited ammunition. American pilots universally praised the P-40's ruggedness. David Lee Tex Hill recalled, "I took a 20mm cannon shell through my right wing on March 24, 1942, over Mogwai. Blew a hole you could put both fists through. The P-40 flew home fine. We patched it overnight, and I flew the same aircraft on a mission the next morning. You couldn't do that with a Zero. One 20mm hit, and they burned." Robert Little, who achieved 11 confirmed victories before being killed in the strafing accident in May 1942, wrote in a letter home, "The Jap Zero is faster in the climb and can turn inside us every time. But we're faster in the dive, and our planes can take punishment theirs cannot. Chennault taught us to use our advantages and avoid their advantages. It sounds simple, and it is simple, but it requires discipline. Men who break discipline die." Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, who achieved 6 victories with the AVG before resigning and later becoming famous as commander of Marine Fighter Squadron VMF 214 Black Sheep in 1943-44, offered this assessment. The P-40 was not a great fighter plane. It was an adequate fighter plane flown by men who understood its limitations and exploited its strengths. The difference between adequate and dead is tactics. Charles Older, who achieved 10 confirmed victories with the AVG and survived the war, stated in a 1991 interview, "People ask if we were heroes. We were mercenaries paid very well to kill Japanese pilots. But Chennault made us effective mercenaries. He studied the enemy, identified their weaknesses, and trained us to exploit those weaknesses. Every victory we achieved validated his tactical system. The P-40 versus Zero matchup proved that inferior equipment with superior tactics beats superior equipment with inferior tactics." When the AVG disbanded on July 4, 1942, only 5 pilots accepted U.S. Army commissions and remained in theater with the 23rd Fighter Group, the Army unit that inherited the Flying Tigers mission. Most AVG personnel returned to the United States. Some rejoined their original services. Others left military service entirely, having fulfilled their 1-year contracts and earned substantial bonuses. Pilots who achieved 10 or more victories earned $5,000 in bonuses alone, equivalent to approximately $85,000 in 2024 dollars. The 23rd Fighter Group continued operating P-40s over China and Burma through 1943, maintaining the tactical doctrine Chennault had established. Later P-40 variants, particularly the P-40E Warhawk and P-40N Kitty Hawk, incorporated improved engines, better armaments, and refined aerodynamics, but retained the fundamental characteristics: heavy construction, good dive speed, excellent firepower, and inadequate maneuverability for dogfighting. The P-40 served throughout World War II in every theater. Total production reached 13,738 aircraft across all variants from 1939 through 1944. The P-40 never achieved the glamorous reputation of aircraft like the P-51 Mustang or P-47 Thunderbolt, which offered better all-around performance. But in China and Burma from December 1941 through mid-1942, the shark-mouthed P-40 Warhawk became the most feared American fighter in Asia. Not because it was the best aircraft, but because it was flown by pilots who refused to fight fair. December 20, 1941. Kunming Airfield. Robert J. Sandell led his flight of 4 P-40Bs through a diving attack at 420 miles per hour, destroyed 4 Japanese bombers in the first pass, and escaped before Japanese fighters could react. That engagement established the pattern that would define the next 6.5 months. The examination of captured Zero fighters in late 1942 and 1943, after the AVG had disbanded, but while the tactical lessons remained fresh, provided American intelligence with complete understanding of the aircraft they had defeated. Engineers measured fuel tank construction, noted the absence of protection systems, calculated the weight savings, and compiled reports documenting Japanese design philosophy. One report, filed by Navy technical intelligence officers examining a captured A6M at Naval Air Station North Island in September 1942, concluded, "The Zero fighter represents an entirely different design philosophy from American practice. Every design choice prioritizes offensive capability over crew survivability. The result is an aircraft with exceptional range and maneuverability, achieved by accepting vulnerability to battle damage that would be unacceptable in American service. American fighters trade some performance for protection, armor, and robust construction. The Zero trades protection for performance. In combat between disciplined opponents, the American approach proves superior." The report continued. The success of the American volunteer group in China demonstrated that tactical doctrine appropriate to aircraft characteristics defeats superior performance specifications. The P-40 could not outturn, outclimb, or outmaneuver the Zero in any flight regime. Yet AVG pilots achieved a kill ratio exceeding 15-1 by refusing to engage in flight regimes where the Zero held advantage and exploiting the single flight regime where the P-40 held advantage: high-speed diving attacks. The lesson applies universally. Understand your equipment's strengths, understand your enemy's weaknesses, and fight only in circumstances where you hold advantage. Claire Lee Chennault, promoted to Major General and commanding the 14th Air Force in China through 1945, wrote in his 1949 memoir, Way of a Fighter, "The Flying Tigers prove that air combat is not won by the side with the best aircraft, but by the side with the best tactics and discipline. We flew obsolete fighters against superior opponents and won because we understood what we could do, what we could not do, and we maintained iron discipline to exploit advantages while avoiding disadvantages. That lesson remains valid for any military force facing a technologically superior opponent." The P-40 Warhawk that seemed hopelessly outmatched in December 1941 became legendary precisely because it was outmatched, and won anyway. The shark teeth painted on those aircraft represented more than decoration. They symbolized an approach to warfare that prioritized intelligence over brute force, discipline over courage, and tactical innovation over technological superiority. The Japanese Zero fighters that dominated Asian skies from 1940 through mid-1942 represented brilliant engineering in service of specific requirements. Jiro Horikoshi and his team at Mitsubishi created exactly what the Imperial Japanese Navy requested: a long-range, highly maneuverable fighter capable of achieving air superiority over vast distances. The design sacrifices, unprotected fuel tanks, no armor, lightweight construction, seemed reasonable given the opposition Japanese forces expected to face. But warfare punishes assumptions. The Zero's design assumed opponents would engage in turning dogfights where superior maneuverability decided outcomes. The design assumed enemy armament would remain light rifle-caliber machine guns that couldn't penetrate aircraft structure effectively. The design assumed Japanese pilots' superior training and experience would overcome any material deficiencies. Those assumptions proved catastrophically wrong when facing American pilots trained in asymmetric tactics and armed with 6.50 machine guns. The mathematics were brutally simple. The P-40's 2,146-pound weight disadvantage became a 100-mile-per-hour dive speed advantage. The Zero's ability to turn inside any opponent became irrelevant when opponents refused to turn. Japanese pilots' years of combat experience meant nothing against a tactical system that denied them the type of combat in which that experience applied. Technological superiority in maneuverability, climb rate, and range mattered less than tactical superiority in doctrine, discipline, and execution. From December 20, 1941 through July 4, 1942, 100 American volunteers destroyed 229 confirmed Japanese aircraft, or 296 by AVG claims, while losing 14 pilots in air-to-air combat. Those numbers tell a story about how wars are actually won, not through superior technology alone, but through understanding how to employ available technology against specific opponents in specific circumstances. The shark-mouthed P-40 Warhawk was not the best fighter of World War II. It was not the fastest, not the most maneuverable, not the longest ranged, not the best armed. But in the hands of pilots who understood its single critical advantage and possessed the discipline to exploit that advantage exclusively, the P-40 became lethal enough to shatter the myth of Japanese invincibility in the air. And in that single fact lies the entire story of why tactical innovation defeats technological superiority, why discipline trumps raw performance, and why understanding both your own limitations and your enemy's weaknesses can transform apparent disadvantage into overwhelming victory. The Flying Tigers didn't win because they flew the best aircraft. They won because they fought smart, fought disciplined, and refused to fight on any terms except their own.